Welcome everyone. I think we purposely put this session at the end of the program because everyone is looking for the money and we don't want to leave you before giving this information. So that's why thank you very much. In this session I will continue in Turkish, then and I hope you have all the translator equipment. And beforehand I would like to thanks to all the translators for their all support in this event. I know it's very difficult job and I will try to keep the timeline in this session. We are planning to end this session at 5 p.m. to the sharp, hopefully.
15'te bitireceğiz.
Yerel yönetimler.
Distinguished guests, we are in the last session of our program for today, and we will be talking about funds and finance tools for climate neutral cities, and we will exchange opinions with our panelists. Now, cities are playing a key role in becoming climate neutral, and currently, when we look at it, 75% of the EU population reside in cities, although cities actually cover a small part. And when we look at the world in general, we see that more than 65% of energy consumption and more than 75% of carbon emissions come from cities. So to stop this from increasing, of course, the European Green Deal has played a very important role, and by 2030 there's a target to reduce emissions by 55%, and by 2050 the aim is to become a climate neutral continent. And of course, Turkey also has its becoming climate neutral commitment, and it is very similar to the path of Europe. But of course, it is not possible to do any of this without coordination with cities. In terms of climate neutral targets, what cities need the most is financing, funds. And we heard about this in the previous panelist as well. The esteemed panelist mentioned that the biggest challenge was the financial burden, and of course there is a need for resources, and that's the biggest question mark. And when we look at the Horizon Europe program, there is a goal to find solutions for social problems and ensure citizen participation. And of course the city's mission is a part of this program, and the city's mission helps cities access EU funds and develop financial tools. And with national promotion and development banks and with other financial institutions, there is an effort to ensure access to financial tools for municipalities. Now, as you know, many tools are accessible for EU countries, but countries like Turkey and Israel, so associated countries, are finding it hard to access these funds. And we are going to try and inform you about how to access funds as part of this panel. Now I would like to invite our guests, and once again I would like to thank MARUF for the organization of this event. And first of all, I would like to focus on İLBANK, and I would like to invite Deputy Director General Emrah Baydemir. Welcome, Mr. Baydemir. You can take a seat as you wish. It will be like a conversation, a chit-chat for us. And now from the coordination of the EU-Europe, and also I would like to invite Burcu Akyol, expert for EU Affairs Programming Department and Directorate for EU Affairs. And from the European delegation, supporting technology transfer and financial tools for SMEs Program Manager Özgür Öcal, please. Welcome, Mr. Özgür. And from EIB, European Investment Bank, I would like to invite Gonca Şanlı. And finally, I would like to invite Associate Director of Infrastructure Division from European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD, who is also in charge of environmental and infrastructure projects in our region, Ms. İdil Gürsel. Now, I would like to start with Ms. Burcu to talk about EFSD+, which is quite a new program, and she can talk about the financial platform, the Turkish investment platform. And we'll start with you, and then we'll move forward with questions. Thank you very much, Çağrı. Hello, I'm Burcu Akyol. I work at the European Union Directorate, and we have the European Sustainable Development Fund, which is shortened as EFSD+, and we are, and this is a commission implemented for the decision taken for Turkey to benefit from this, and of course for green investments and all investments that aim for the struggle with climate change can benefit from this. Well, as the institutional IPA coordination body, we had been managing projects with IPA grants, but when we look at EFSD plus and the Turkey investment platform, we see the private sector is also in the scope now. And the Turkey investment platform does not have a specific limit allocated to countries per year, but basically the EU allocated 40 billion euros of guarantees globally for the years 2021 to 2027, and basically all regions can benefit from this. And the guarantees are based on the criteria defined by the European Commission. They depend on various conditions, and of course, the risk of the sustainable financial institutions are taken here. And of course, the extent of the risk, the extent of the investment, all all play a part in this criteria. And the beneficiaries of the Turkey investment platform, as I mentioned, is the public sector, what we call sovereign investments, the things that we had been doing with IPA, with blending projects, so EU grants and IFI credits being blended, basically. So if there is going to be a guarantee support for a project, then EU takes on the risk of IFI and can provide a contribution. Then the private sector, with this introduces a new financial collaboration dimension, and now the private sector can also benefit from this investment platform with the contributions of the EU. And finally, there is one more category for municipalities, and currently our municipalities were involved in processes with IFIs and ILBANK, who are very experienced. But now, if there is a project conducted in the specific investment areas that I will be listing, then they can apply for EU funds. So what are the conditions these projects need to meet? First of all, there's a policy-first approach. The EU priorities need to be met because, as you know, especially in terms of sustainable development goals and Green Deal global gateways and employment, and these are the political priorities, so these projects need to be in line with these priorities. So where are we in the process right now? We are at the beginning of the process. The first call was completed in July 2022, and there were 4 international financial institutions who joined, and there are no new calls as of yet, but basically the project design activities will be initiated based on this first call, and those that have major proposed investment programs were part of this call, and then these projects will be detailed where municipalities can also join, and the implementations of the projects will start following the agreement between EU and IFI. Now, when we look at EFST Plus, again, is opening 6 windows of investment, and these are not really mutually exclusive. They can be additional areas of investment for municipalities, but I mean, of course, there are investments around energy efficiency, for example, can be under the connectivity topic. And to make efficient use of time, I am just going to briefly talk about the Sustainable Cities investment window. Under this investment window, all of the investments regarding sustainable cities can be listed. So smart cities, waste management, energy management, insulation in buildings. So many areas, as we heard in the previous session, can be subject to these investments, and also economic and social development, creating employment, and enhancing quality of life in the urban area, energy efficiency and carbon neutral investments in transportation can all be goals that are listed in these investments. That is all from me for now. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Burcu. First of all, hopefully this Turkey investment platform will have many projects that will set an example in the future. It is very exciting for all of us. Now I would like to turn to our second speaker. Especially when we look at the calls of Horizon Europe, it seems there's a lot of reference to synergy funds. If you can turn off your microphone, please. I hear an echo somewhere. Is it because we have 2 microphones on? I turned this off, but can you check? So we don't disturb the participants. So in terms of synergy, there are other programs that can be beneficial for us, and EBRD has programs in that scope, and that is why we have İdil Gürsel here with us. Thank you very much for being with us, because EBRD really is carrying out significant investments in cities specifically. We see it in the news as well. So I would like to ask you a question, and after that, Ms. İdil can continue with her presentation. Welcome. Now, in terms of the struggle against climate change, EBRD has global scale and national scale activities in Turkey as well. Can you briefly inform us about them? Thank you.
Teşekkür ediyorum. Ben de
Thank you. Let me quickly talk a bit about EBRD. Very briefly, to talk about EBRD in Turkey. Turkey is a very big market. We operate in 38 countries, and it has a 13% share in terms of total portfolio. Turkey is the largest EBRD country of operation. Since 2009, when we started to operate, we've financed 398 projects, which account to a cumulative investment of 17.3 billion euros. The private sector accounts for the major part of our portfolio. The real sector, energy sectors, and banks account for 1/3 of it. Every year, we give at least 1 billion euros. This year, we expect this to go up to 2 billion euros. When we look at the municipal financing, since our inception, we've been active with municipalities because that is one of our mission to provide development by supporting local government. So roughly, we have a loan volume of around 1 billion euros. And on the left side, you can see Bursa, Gaziantep, Mersin, Izmir, Istanbul, Ankara, Mersin. Several cities have received investments from EBRD, and all of these support the green transformation goal. In addition to our investments, we have grants where we support project development as well as monitoring construction, tendering, and then monitoring these activities. So we have provided a lot of grants to that end. Likewise, our grants are also used for capacity building in municipalities and building proper organizational structures. PPP is very important to us, and in the municipal sector, we provide consulting for PPP when necessary. In this sector, we are able to give loans to everyone, to governments, to municipalities. If there's a tender and if there's a PPP in question, we can give loans to private sector companies. The tender rules, the tender specifications are very important to us. We have our own advisors who review these requirements. Well, I'm going to say it's part of our DNA as a bank, that is environment. And in 2021, EBRD launched a new approach to asking how we could support this green transformation. As you know, our mission is to support the SDGs. Therefore, at least 50% of our investments have to go to green investments. At the same time, we have all of our investments screened to make sure that they're in line with the Paris Agreement. When we look at the cities, how do we support cities? The major problem that we see in cities is that there's an abundance of investment or investment items, but there's a problem in terms of prioritizing them, and they have problems in terms of access to finance. So we have a 5 billion euro framework for green cities, and for the cities that we work together with, we provide consulting in terms of assessing their projects, measuring carbon dioxide emissions, and prioritizing. And the strategy and policy support is part of our Green Cities Action Plan, which comprises 12 to 18 months in terms of consulting services. We work together with the municipal authorities, and as a result, we support infrastructure works that will support this green transformation, and then we provide the financing. One important pillar of this is access to green finance. For example, as part of the EBRD Green Cities program in Turkey, there's a clean technology fund that is available to Turkey, which accounts to 40 million euros. This was given as a grant or a privileged loan, to put it correctly. So for certain products, to reduce the cost of these loans, we made this grant available. And there's also the Green Climate Fund and other funds that are available as grants or as privileged loans. Another topic that I want to touch on is the earthquake. Of course, it changed everyone's lives. And as a bank, we provided a package worth 1 billion euros for institutions, SMEs, financial institutions, and infrastructure work. Together with the provincial bank ILBANK, we will be working closely with ILBANK because we know there's a huge need for infrastructure investments, but they have limited resources. And the earthquake, because of the earthquake, we are seeking privileged loans. If we cannot find those loans, then we will provide other ways of support. I had 2 project examples, but actually I don't need to touch on them. So that ends my presentation. Thank you very much, Idil. Before the earthquake, you mentioned the available investments, and after the earthquake, and together with the Commission, we are curious as to, regarding these cities, we want to make them more resilient, and today's topic, today's meeting focuses on climate resilience. So when you're giving out those loans, are you going to take this criteria into account? Is it only going to be a focus on earthquake resilient houses, buildings, or are you going to take into account climate as well? Now, because we provide infrastructure financing, we're talking about transportation, water and wastewater investments, and these directly address climate issues. So the bank provides investments, finance for investments that are green investments and that support the Paris Agreement. So any financing we provide will, of course, be green. Thank you very much for your input. Now, I'd like to move on to another bank, the European Investment Bank. We have Gonca Şanlı with us, so I will ask my questions later. Today, we are having an issue with the pointer. I hope you don't have the same issue. I'm Gonca Şanlı. I'm a loan officer for Turkish projects at the European Investment Bank. I've been working there for 6.5 years. First of all, I want to briefly introduce EIB. Anyway, I'll start. It was established in 1958, the European Investment Bank. It is Europe's biggest bank, although we are not very visible in Turkey in past few years. The main difference between us and EBRD and other banks is our shareholder structure. We have 26 EU member states. Our biggest shareholders, Germany, France, and Italy, and Spain. Therefore, while we are a bank, we also represent a political power. So that is our main difference in the AFI world. And we are a European bank. We also have the European Investment Fund, which serves to provide loans to SMEs, guarantees, and equity capital. We call it the funds of funds. It's our affiliate. Coming back to the European Investment Bank, as I said, it's the world's biggest bank, which serves not only Europe, but also outside of Europe. We have invested trillions and trillions of euros outside of Europe. Climate has always been a priority for EIB, but especially the European Commission that has labeled us as the European Climate Bank. And as Idil said, all of our projects seek the climate component and make sure that they're compatible with the Paris Agreement. As I said, it's a huge bank, it's a big bank. We have operations in more than 160 countries, and the headquarters are in Luxembourg. We have external offices in around 60 countries, and we have more than 4,000 employees. Talking about Turkey, I have to mention EIB Global. It was set up in 2022 under EIB, and for non-EU member states, all of the countries were gathered under EIB Global. So when I go anywhere, I have to use my business card has EIB Global written on. I don't know if you can read it from the screen, but speaking of figures, for example, EIB in 2022, our financing reached 65 billion euros, and around 11 billion of these went to non-EU states. So in the past decade, EIB has invested more than 70 billion euros. Before moving on to EIB Turkey, let me talk about the added value of our financing. We have a very strong workforce. More than bankers, we have engineers as employees. Therefore, in terms of project preparation, approval, project monitoring, we are very strong in these domains. We are very successful. Again, in terms of technical advice, once the project is developed, these engineers go out on the field and provide technical support. And there's also, of course, the financial dimension. We're talking about very big amounts and long terms and more convenient loan rates. Coming to EIB Turkey, actually we have been providing financing to Turkey since 1963, but then there was a change in 2005 as with the acceleration of Turkey's EU accession. You will see there was a huge leap, and in the past 2 decades, EIB has provided 27.3 billion euros lending to Turkey. To repeat, although we haven't been very active in recent years due to obvious reasons, right now in Turkey we have an exposure of 9 billion euros. So what have we done? As you can see on the slide, we provide financing for the Istanbul-Ankara high-speed railway, the Marmaray Tunnel after the 1999 earthquake. Through ISMEP, under the Istanbul governorship, we gave a 900 million euro loan to the Istanbul governorship. For DSE, for forests, we gave a loan. Again, TÜBİTAK, I'd like to thank them for the invitation. ILBANK, TANAP, the Trans-Anatolian gas pipeline. And we have a loan to Yapı Kredi Bank. Now, you can see on this graph what I've been talking about. This demonstrates the loan rates over the last 20 years, the lending amounts over the past 2 decades. In 2017, between Turkey and the EU, because of the tensions, let's say, starting from 2017, it went down to 500 and even all the way down to 50 million euros, which was lending to the private sector. And unfortunately, since then, we have not been providing new investment, new financing. That is to correct any possible misunderstanding. We're not giving any new loans. So what you see in the last column, we have 400 million euros. I wish it hadn't been the case, but this is for the earthquake. This is a loan given for the earthquake. Unfortunately, this doesn't mean we are back in operation in Turkey. The definitive thing here will be the relationship between Turkey and the EU, but of course the earthquake supersedes all of these, and due to that we re-entered the Turkish market after 4 years, of stagnation, and I hope that we will be back in operation in Turkey. When you look at the amounts, we're talking about plus 20 billion euros, the vast majority lending to SMEs, which accounts to 49%. So we, as the EIB, give loans to state agencies. This includes municipalities. Secondly, we give loans to SMEs through banks, both through state banks and private banks. And thirdly, we also give loans to big private sector companies. It's limited, though. One reason is, unfortunately, unlike other IFIs, we don't have a big office. Our whole office is comprised of 4 people, and the person in charge of Turkey is actually located in Luxembourg, and then there's me. We don't have a capacity in place, and that has always been the case. As I said, SMEs account for the vast majority of our loans. This is followed by transportation and telecommunication, then environment and energy, then industry and services. This includes the direct loans that we give to the private sector. Then we see urban development and healthcare. Coming to municipalities, as you can see on the slide, since 1995, we have been providing finance to municipality. Of course, it goes back to an earlier date, but in total, it exceeds 3.3 billion euros. You will see different colored lines. One of them, for example, is the municipal water infrastructure, Turkey. Several municipalities benefit from this. The white ones show individual municipalities. The colored lines show that that loan covers several municipalities. There's İLBANK. This is also multiple beneficiary loan. And there's also the darker blue color, the Madad Fund. This is a 100% EU grant for refugees in Turkey. And last but not least, we have the earthquake reconstruction loan for the cities in the earthquake region. Now, in the past, for example, with Antalya municipality, Samsun municipality, we were able to give direct loans. We had that capacity, but now our biggest supporter is İLBANK, if we're talking about financing for municipalities, especially the water sector and transportation sector is where we are most active. And I can say that the water sector tops all these sectors. İLBANK is our top strategic partner. The Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality and the Ankara Metropolitan Municipality, in terms of their credibility and because of the capacity issues, municipalities that we work directly with. But apart from these 2 municipalities, we have assigned İLBANK as our strategic partnership, as our partner. Here you see 2 İLBANK loans. One accounts to 150 million euros. It's an environmental loan. And then there's the urban transport and environmental loan. And this will be followed by, as you can see, the earthquake loan, which totals to 400 million. And there's also the Madad Fund. It's a 100% EU grant. As I said, it covers 6 municipalities: Gaziantep, Hatay, Kilis, and Şanlı. You can think of this as a project which covers, for example, it can be a project that covers water, wastewater, sewage, but has several items under it. So we are a mediator for EU's funds and enable these funds through the municipalities. We are working on the earthquake loan. We got the approval to go forward, and it's a record period. Everything was started and ended in 3 months. It's part of the Team Europe's response. Maybe you've been monitoring, there was the conference in Brussels. We got it approved in July, and it will be released. We hope to release it before the end of the year. It's a total of 400 million euros. It has a tenor of 30 years with a 7-year grace period. Because there was an earthquake in that zone, and because the municipalities already had a limited borrowing capacity, you cannot, of course, add an additional loan burden on them. So they are going to transfer this free of charge to ILBANK, and it will be used for water, wastewater, and waste management sectors. As I said, this is where we have our primary focus. We have an indicative project list, but there's no definite list of projects. We are going to decide along the way as we receive the projects. And in the upcoming period, what should we expect? We don't know, because we work together with the European Commission. We cannot go out of their direction. We are going to monitor, follow up other IFIs. And so we will be keeping abreast of the political developments. And I'd like to conclude my words with these political words. And I really hope to come back to Turkey. Thank you.
2016 öncesindeki iş
Thank you very much, Ms. Gonca. I hope the collaboration before 2016 continues as it was, because all those infrastructure investments are investments that Turkey benefits from a lot today. So we heard about, or we have actually witnessed how close EBRD and İLBANK work together. And now I would like to leave the floor to Mr. Emrah Baydemir from İLBANK, because they follow a lot of international work closely, as we can see from their collaborations with EIB and EBRD. So can you tell us about the international projects you are conducting as part of climate adaptation? Yes, thank you. I would like to thank MARUF, the Marlborough Municipalities Union for MARUF. These sessions are very beneficial, so I'd like to thank TÜBİTAK for the session as well, because all of us here work together, and I expected to see more representation from the local governments, but I would like to thank everyone, because there is a lot of valuable input, and of course it takes a lot of patience to follow such a session, so thank you to all the participants. Now, our question is, how are we going to create climate neutral cities? Now, there is a lot of new terminology, like the fight with climate change. Now, why is the climate changing? Is it just because of carbon? Or, I mean, there's a sustainable cities concept, or the sustainable development goals of UN, or the circular economy. You know, there are so many concepts like resilient cities, and everyone is talking about these concepts, but what do these concepts mean? How will we fight climate change, and how are we going to translate it into the field? Now, as İLBANK, we are a bank for municipalities tied to the Ministry of Environment, Urbanization, and Climate Change. So we are authorized by the state for national development and reconstruction. And basically, we are a mini EBRD or mini EIB at the local level. And one of our greatest tasks is to enable know-how transfer together with funding. And we want to transfer know-how from abroad to our country and from our country to abroad. And until now, it has been a one-way transfer of know-how, but very soon we will open İLBANK to the international arena as well, and we will initiate projects in the international arena. So yes, we have to finance local governments, EBRD and EIB and the European delegation. We have projects with all of them, but we have one difference. We have a responsibility. Now, we are all living in Istanbul, in Ankara, but then we have our hometowns. We go back, we visit them, and we need to support their development as well. As we visit our relatives, we sometimes observe that those places are less developed than our metropolises. And I had a hometown, Maraş, Elbistan, and there was a huge destruction with the earthquake. So now we heard about the finances that went into Eskişehir and others, Bursa, but Hakkari Yüksekova is also an area that we need to invest in. It's not like the ozone layer on top of my head is not damaged because, you know, we don't see the impacts of climate change in our specific location. No, it's not like that. Nature gives us a very good example. Nature, when it was first created, I mean, it is in a circular motion. Water is polluted, it then evaporates, goes up into the sky, and then comes back to the surface. And it is basically the definition of circular economy, really. That's how God created nature. So were there no carbon emissions 5,000 or 10,000 years ago at the time of Göbekli Tepe? I mean, when life began on land, bacteria started to be created. The saprotrophs were generated, and of course then there are the areas that absorbs all of these, the sinks. And now, basically, since we have destructed all of this, we are trying to create projects at the local level. And when you look at the projects of local governments, 80% of them are about climate change. We are working with around 8 international institutions, and we have 4 billion euros of financing, and it's going to be 6 soon. We're going to sign another agreement for 2 billion. Now we have EBRD, EIB, the European Union, the World Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, the Japanese International Collaboration Agency, JICA, and then AFD, and the Islamic Development Bank, the UNDP. So we are trying to create climate neutral projects with many of these institutions. Now, why are 80% of the local government projects about climate change? Because transportation is related to this. If you reduce the amount of the gas generated from vehicles, the exhaust gas, then that has an impact. And that's just one example. So in that scope, as İLBANK, together with our international stakeholders and our know-how transfer, we are trying to prevent climate change. So that's our job. Okay, thank you very much. It was quite an inspiring speech. And what I want to ask you is, our local governments have the target to reach net zero, and when they reach you, what is the type of financing you expect them to ask for? Because there are some radical changes that are expected. I mean, can there be a mechanism established to respond to these radical changes? Yes, there can be mechanisms. It can start at a small level and it can be disseminated across the local level. Now, between local governments and municipalities, there's a nuance. There are around 1,400 municipalities in Turkey. And then there are also the provincial administrations, and there are basically more local governments than municipalities. But when we say local governments here, we are referring to municipalities. So the struggle to prevent seepage loss. Now, when you look at all the cities across Turkey, let's say Ankara, I live in Ankara. Where does the water come from? Well, some of it comes from Kızılırmak. And our Samsun governor, for example, had a declaration a few years ago. And he said that in the Bafra region, because there isn't a lot of water coming into the basin from Kızılırmak, we had a lower population of birds. So basically, if we don't reduce our water use in Ankara, since our water comes from Kızılırmak, we are impacting the life of the birds 500 kilometers away, all the way in Samsun, because there is less amount of water flowing into the basin in Bafra. So basically, there is a lot of loss of water that is generated in the pipelines underground. And also, when you look at the pumping stations, there are also the elevation centers, the pumping stations, and all of these have an impact. And because we are now producing water for a lower cost, we are selling water at a lower cost, and that's why water consumption is going up. And if if we are to create resilient cities, you need to be able to continue to supply water during times of disaster. So the quicker you can come back to normal after a disaster, the more resilient you are. That is also an important indicator. So with environmental infrastructure projects, we are trying to serve the climate. Thank you very much. Now I would like to finally leave the floor to Mr. Özgür from the EU-Turkey delegation. Now, the IPA program, as you know, has been ongoing in Turkey for a while. Currently, we have the IPA 3 program. The calls are out. And in the previous terms, we saw that many local governments made use of the IPA programs. And when you look at the sewer systems, in many cities, you will see that it was funded by the EU. There are a lot of examples, and this is just one, really. So I'd like to leave the floor to Mr. Özgür. What can we expect in the new term of the IPA program? And are there problems like the case in EIB? Or how can we benefit from this program at the local government level? Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Çağrı. I would like to thank everyone who put effort into this organization as well, together with the participants. Now we're talking about cities, but as you know, cities are not only hosting citizens. There is a four-sided structure. The industry, public, citizens, and the academia are all hosted by cities. So when you provide sustainable climate funding, you are investing in cities and you are serving all these groups. Now I want to talk about the transformation IPA and the climate funding EU and the transformation it's gone through. Now in 2019, OECD had a case study, and this study still serves as a basis for OECD activities. And OECD says at that time, I mean, you know, for the Paris Agreement or for the Green Deal or the green transformation strategies of Turkey, they're saying collect the data and analyze the impact and attract national and international investment and add private sector funding to this. So local governments, national governments, make sure you build capacity in these areas, and then create a position as to what can be done. And on top of all of this, they say adopt a perspective of inclusiveness, because there are a lot of vulnerable communities in cities as well, women, children, etc. So inclusivity is also very important. And since then, of course, we experienced COVID. There were some regional conflicts that we also witnessed the impacts of. And currently, we are talking about impact investments. And we are not just talking about, basically what we're saying is when we look at ROI, we shouldn't just be looking at the financial side, but the environmental side as well. And the EU has this concept of policy first as of today. So which financial tools do we have? Well, there are actually a lot of tools, financial tools in the EU, but those that Turkey is a beneficiary of are a little more limited. Now, Horizon Europe, as you know, is one of the elements that brings us together, you know, as part of the Climate Neutral Cities mission. Then IPA, Instrument for Pre-Accession, and it is basically for the process of, you know, expansion of Europe, a sort of support that is provided for candidate countries. And now we have a new financial tool, EFSD plus European Fund for Sustainable Development, which is discussed a lot these days. And then there's the Digital Europe program. And the EU and the Commission actually expect one more thing from us. It's a Horizon call. I think it's quite new. I think the application date may have passed. I think the 20th of September was the deadline for applications. There were applicants from Turkey as well, and it is mostly institutions that benefited from IPA that applied. Okay, yes, so this call actually summarizes EU's approach about synergies. So Horizon Europe, Horizon 22, ERDF, IPA, they are calling institutions that benefited from these, and they are saying, let's create a synergy via the Horizon, and let's multiply the impact of the previous support programs. And then we have IPA 3, the latest IPA term, and I would like to draw your attention to Window 4 and Window 5. One is the Green Agenda and Sustainable Connections, and also competitiveness and inclusiveness and competitiveness and inclusive growth. So here we can find various support tools. And of course, as Mr. Çağrı mentioned, when we look at the previous terms of IPA, EU supported a lot of investments with low leverage. What I mean is, for example, wastewater, water, or sewer system infrastructure investments. With 15, 20 million worth of grants, we can conduct these investments. Of course, it is a huge benefit for the dwellers of that city. However, you cannot create more value, like there is no added value created. But when we focus on EFSD plus, and there will be a couple of examples that we can summarize, we have a huge leverage that is created. Burcu summarized it a little bit. The SMEs, for example, the stakeholders in the agricultural area, cities, digital transformation, and there are measures against FX rates. So EFSD Plus is basically aiming to create a larger impact with the guarantee provided by the EU. So if there's a 50 million euro guarantee provided by the EU, since we are mitigating the risks, we can have international or local financial institutions, banks, that can lend loans with less guarantees. And basically, with 50 million euros, you can enable 500 million euros of investments. And I won't go into too much detail, but I'll give you a few examples. Of course, the key role is on the international financial institutions as part of EFSD+, and they have already submitted their programs. For example, with green bonds, there is an intention to mitigate the risks of investors. And another one is by AFD. I guess, refer to it as the Development Agency of France. So again, for sustainable investments, the European guarantee is used, and they support their municipalities and local governments with this fund. So what are we doing as part of IPA 3, and what kind of a synergy can we put forward? Now, Turkey is working on a new project which will contribute to the climate neutral cities mission. Now, if you join the session this morning, Istanbul and Izmir were two cities that were selected as part of Horizon Europe. And of course, there are 10 more municipalities that there's a partnership formed with, and they is a desire to have strategies for them as well. And if that is possible, then we can increase the number of cities who will receive support in this scope. And the feasibility activities are important, and in this way, access to funding will be easier for these cities, because if you have your roadmap, feasibility studies, then you can go to a financial institution and you can tell them about your issues and you can access financial tools. But I think it would be beneficial to state this. International financial institutions have different agendas, then local institutions have other agendas, industrial institutions have other agendas and other demands. Now, Mr. Emrah was talking about the fact that, you know, a lot of cities are benefiting, but then maybe the Hakkari province is not benefiting. Because, I mean, this is something we realize in all areas of life. Some companies have the access to loans, but other companies don't. And this is one of the biggest problems that we experience in Turkey. I mean, if you are able to pay the loan, you can get a loan, but if not, then banks don't want to lend to you. So that's the case even for countries. And what we are trying to do as part of IPA 3 and EFSD Plus is basically we want to fund investments that are deemed risky by financial institutions, like climate investments, for example. And through this, we are planning to encourage such investments. So as the EU delegation, we are trying to do one more thing, although it may seem like a minor thing. We are trying to bring stakeholders together and tell them about EFSD and the opportunities it provides. And through focus group meetings, we try to inform them about existing opportunities, and we want to reveal their ideas around projects, because the key role under EFSD Plus belongs to international financial institutions, and currently we still have the investment programs that we refer to as PIP, but they're is a need for country-specific project ideas, and we are trying to ensure that these are matured as well, and both to financial institutions, industrial institutions, and civil society institutions and regulatory authorities. We are trying to reach them and inform them about these things. And at the end of all of this, I guess we need to make some clear suggestions. Now, we have the donor system, the donor mechanism. There are a lot of international financial institutions active in Turkey: EIB, EBRD, World Bank, the German Development Bank. So if we can bring them all together and take the Paris Agreement, the Green Deal, and Turkey's country priorities and evaluate them all together, that would be a very good progress. Now, each city has its own priorities. In one city, you could have solar resources. In another city, you could have geothermal resources. Now, each city needs to unleash its own potential and discover where they have a gap in terms of financing and what type of funding they need. As I carry out my activities, of course, I saw this page from Net Zero, the finance guidance tool. You could be a local government, you could be another sort of organization. You need to select the type of investment you want to make. And then you look at what existing opportunities, what means you have, and then if you can access international financing, what your credit score is, and then you can see if you need blending or others. It gives you a recommendation. This is just one example. There are thousands of tools and resources that you can utilize. I think cities need to evaluate their situation, identify their areas where they require funding, and then they need to take action accordingly. Thank you very much for listening.
Şimdi Özgür Bey gerçekten çok
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Özgür. This was a very comprehensive presentation, and you focused on the mission cities, and you connected the two really. So I would like to give 1 minute to our panelists, if you would like to say any final words about this topic. Thank you. Now, finances are limited. There's a lot of investment needs, and most of the investments will be supporting the green transition. And then there's the earthquake. There is a huge need for investment there, billions of dollars. Then in Istanbul, for example, for the metro, the subway, again, this is green transition. You need millions of dollars. So I want to take it up from where Özgür left it off. We need to make sure we utilize these instruments in a way to create leverage. An investment should not just be based on grants. We should have grants and loans blended, and we need to lower the costs so it can become more appealing. Now, I always criticize this. The municipalities try to do their own investments all the time. Then there's the public-private partnership that municipalities have been focusing on. Then there is the build, operate, transfer law, which went through some changes for water treatment purposes. And now there's talk about innovation projects. But I mean, in the end, we need to make the best use of the existing instruments to create the biggest leverage. And for that, we need to think out of the box, I believe. Thank you. Thank you. Emrah, do you want to say anything? Well, let me say this. Rather than a final remark, it's going to be like a preface, but you know, there are so many pillars to this. There is the Ministry of Treasury, then there's a strategy and budget side, then we have the laws, we have the Ministry of International Affairs, External Affairs, and we need to be in line with the policies, and we need to be in line with the legislations. And of course, when our local governments apply to ILBANK, then we give them all this information. Blending is very important, and we are the first institution implementing this in Turkey. And basically, we are a non-profit institution, and we are providing service to all of these local governments. And other than just being climate neutral, we also need to focus on disaster risk management, and we need to ensure that our cities become resilient. So we expect all our local governments to come to İLBANK. Thank you very much. Mr. Özgür. Yes, now as you know, when you ask anyone if they have a project, you generally get a response where people say, we want to install solar panels on our roof. So I'll give you two examples. With AFD partnership, İLBANK, I think, offers around 200 loans, right? It's 15 million euros. It's not too small, yes. But for sustainable urban mobility plans as well, we have various loans. And then for decarbonization, in the maritime sector, we are working together with EBRD, and we are focusing on the use of sustainable fuels and the manufacturing of vehicles that are able to use these sustainable fuels. So there are a lot of innovative tools. We need to think outside the box. We need to come together. And of course, these investment ideas need to move away from conventional ideas. Ms. Gonca, do you have any comments? I would like to thank you once again. I don't want to repeat everything that's been said, but our local governments need to be supported through İLBANK, but you can consider this as an open call as well, because when we talk about appraisers, the appraising system, we are talking about new financing models, new project models. These are very beneficial, all the way from the procurement to the project, to the finalization, and to the monitoring of the project. Thank you. And Ms. Burcu, for the final words. As our esteemed general manager mentioned, I would like to add to an important topic. Now we have a national investment program created by the Directorate of Strategy, the Presidency of Strategy and Budget of the Presidency of Turkey. And of course, we have our NİPAK office, the IPA office, we have the national IPA coordination, and we have the IPA 3 circular published in June, and we are working together with the Presidency of Strategy and Budget and the Ministry of Treasury and Financial Affairs. And of course, we are in constant contact with the EU delegation and the European Commission. Now, our municipalities can have practical questions about, yes, there is a mechanism there, but how can I be part of it? What can I do with my project ideas? Where can I apply? Now, there is no area for application within the project, but the projects will continue in two categories, with or without treasury assurance. And the issues about municipality are first shared with İLBANK, and if we have been informed by the EU Commission, we usually work with the Union of Municipalities of Turkey and İLBANK. We inform them, and in the private sector, we make sure we inform the umbrella organizations of various sectors. So if you have ideas, you can also contact the Ministry of Environment, Urbanization, and Climate Change. So yes, you can address your questions to us as well, but you can refer to these three institutions in particular. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you. I would like to thank our panelists and participants, and I would like to thank the interpreters for helping us all day. And thank you all for taking part in our session.